Hey everyone, welcome back to American History with Duffy. So today we're going to be looking at our English kings and queens again. We're going to start here around 1660. So of course this is the restoration of the English monarchy when we're going to get Charles II bringing the Stuart family back into power. Now something I want us to remember is that when the Civil War started, Charles II was actually only 8 years old. His dad, Charles I, was married to Queen Henrietta Maria. Now, Henrietta Maria was a princess of France. She was the daughter of King Henry IV of France. Now, that means that she's Catholic, and she is going to have a lot of influence on both of her sons. During the Civil War, Charles II is going to ultimately flee to France, and he's going to live in exile in France until the Restoration in 1660. Now, during his time period, Charles II is not going to have any legitimate heirs. He was married. He was married to a Portuguese princess. Her name was Catherine. She was the daughter of the King of Portugal. Unfortunately, they're not going to have any biological children together. Charles did have illegitimate heirs. However, he is not going to name any of them his successor. Now, when Charles returned back to England to restore the crown, he is going to have to deal with some pretty challenging issues. So one of those in 1665 is going to be a great plague that will strike London. And then the very next year, we have the Great Fire of London. There are some challenges to his reign, and this may cause him some financial difficulty as well. Charles's younger brother, that is going to be James, the Duke of York, also fled to France for a while, and when Charles passed in 1685, his younger brother James is going to become our new king. James became the King of England in 1685, and by that time he was very much a controversial figure. Let's go ahead and look a little bit at his background. Now, James is going to get married to a lady named Anne Hyde. Anne and James are ultimately going to have two surviving children. They're both daughters. Their oldest daughter was named Mary, and their youngest was Anne. Both Mary and Anne are both going to be raised Protestant. That's really important because James in 1669 is going to convert to Catholicism, the religion of his mom. Now, he's going to make this public in 1673, and his brother Charles is really going to hear about it. James will get out of the picture for a little while up in Scotland, and then ultimately he's going to try to remain fairly quiet, even though he controlled a large amount of territory. Remember, this is James who controlled New York. It's also the same man who is going to have the power over the Royal African Company, who will take over the Dutch trade routes on the west coast of Africa. Now, his first wife, Anne, who he married in 1660, is sadly going to pass away in 1671. She was only in her mid-30s when she died of cancer. James will remarry in 1673. And he remarries an Italian princess. She was just 15 years old, and her name was Mary of Modena. Mary was also Catholic. Now, while they're not going to have any biological children yet, they are ultimately, in 1688, going to announce the birth of their son named James. With James's announcement that his very Catholic wife has just given birth to a son, that's when Parliament says, nope, we're not going down that route again. They are going to ask for the Protestant Princess Mary if she and her husband will become the new monarchs, if they will become Mary II and William III. So one more time, Mary, who was the very first child of James, she had been married to her cousin, William, the Prince of Orange. He was a Dutch prince who was also British, because his mom was James's sister. Being willing to kick old dad out of his job, Mary and William are going to sail to England. Now, I do have a bit of a fun story here. When Mary and William sail up to London, they're going to be greeted, shall we say, by James's military. Now, James's military was led by a gentleman named John Churchill. That last name might sound a bit familiar. His descendant, Sir Winston Churchill. Anyway, one more time. William and Mary sail up to London. John Churchill, with James's military, confronts them and says, "Welcome, my new king and queen." He then joins with William and Mary to now kick James out of England. James is going to flee to his mom's ancestral home, which means he's going to flee to France, the enemy of England. So Mary and William, when they sail to England, this is starting what's called the Glorious Revolution, also known as the Bloodless Revolution. Now, Parliament decided when James fled away from England into France that James basically deserted his crown, and so they didn't need to depose him. Instead, they just now offer the crown to Mary and William. However, there was a catch, and that catch was that William and Mary had to agree to the Declaration of Right. This declaration led to the English Bill of Rights, which is going to be a document outlining some freedoms here of the people of England. These freedoms are ultimately going to be very important to American history. We can see some of the influences from the English Bill of Rights on the young James Madison, who is in his late 30s writing the American Bill of Rights. Mary and William will agree to the Declaration of Right. Here are a couple highlights. First, that individuals are allowed to petition the king without prosecution, that English people are allowed to have arms, that you must have free elections for Parliament. You must also allow for members of Parliament to have freedom of speech. And then finally, the right against unusual punishments and excessive bail. Now, sadly for Mary II, she is going to pass away at the age of 32. She had smallpox and passed before they could have any surviving biological children. William is going to remain as the king. He didn't want to be just the consort. He wanted to be the king, and so he will remain king until 1702. Sadly for him, he is going to be in an accident. His collarbone was broken, and he is going to perish. When this happens, the crown is going to go to Mary's younger sister, Anne. When Mary passed away, Anne became the queen in waiting, shall we say. But she will become queen in her own right in 1702 with the passing of her brother-in-law, King William. Now, Anne was married. She was married to a Danish prince, and they are going to have a slew of kids. But sadly, none of those children will survive into adulthood, and she is going to remain the sole queen, the sole monarch. She will not have her husband crowned king. It is during her administration in 1707 that what we've called England is now going to be united by the Act of Union, which now unites England and Scotland into what we call Great Britain. So I will do my best to now change my vernacular from calling it England to Great Britain. I will usually just abbreviate that to GB if I'm writing on the board. Now, Anne and her husband did have, as I mentioned, quite a few children. However, sadly, they all passed before the age of 11. She was pregnant 17 times, and of the 5 surviving children, only one lived past the age of 2. That was Prince William, who passed away 5 days after his 11th birthday. So, when she passes away, the crown is a little confused. Where does it go? We're going to have to look all the way up the family tree into Charles I's daughter, Elizabeth, who had married a Hanoverian gentleman, this beginning the Hanoverian line of Georges. These are going to be men who were born in the Germanic territory of Hanover. Now, George I, when he became King of England, he was in his 50s and he did not speak any English. Because of that, he is going to rely on one member of Parliament, his prime minister, to assist him with governing the country. Sir Robert Walpole is going to be extraordinarily influential, and he is going to aid George I throughout his administration. Sir Robert will continue this during the reign of George II as well. Although George II spoke more English, he still spent most of his time in Hanover, And he relied on Sir Robert so much so that he is going to gift the Prime Minister with a residence, and that residence is 10 Downing Street, which today is still the home of the English Prime Minister. It is going to be George II, where we're going to have our last colony, the colony of Georgia, established. We will also see a whole bunch of difficulties with the enemy of England, that's going to be France. But the big troubles will, of course, be during the time of George II's grandson, our new king, George III. Becoming king at just 22 years old, George III is the first English monarch to be born in England since Queen Anne. George III is also the king that most Americans remember. If you look at his dates of 1760 to 1820, these of course correlate with the dates of the American Revolution and our second American Revolution, which is known as the War of 1812. Now, in 1801, I will say that during the time of George III, this is now when the government of Great Britain will unify with the government of Ireland, becoming the United Kingdom. So during our War of 1812, I will do my best to now reference this as the UK. Something I want us to think about, though, is for all of these kings and queens that we've had in England during this entire stretch, the enemy of England had remained one country, kind of. It wasn't always the enemy. Sometimes it was actually the blood relative, and that relative was France.